welcome to the Children's Science Center. We are bringing you the National Cherry Blossom Festival virtually. And I said Science Center, so I'm in a science museum and I am a scientist. So you may think I just work with chemicals or engineering, but scientists actually work with flowers and plants and the natural world around us too. So let's take a look inside a flower today and talk about some of the chemistry and other science that goes into it. So I have a flower here, and you may be familiar with the parts of the flower. We have the flower petals, which not only are they beautiful and smell good too, they also attract pollinators such as bees and butterflies. Inside the petals, we have the parts of the flower that contain the pollen, and this is how flowers make more flowers. Next, you have the leaves of the flowers. What I like about these flowers is that they have really, really big leaves. And the leaves can help defend the flower, keep it standing up. Leaves are also famous for photosynthesis, the process of using sunlight for energy. So we may eat pizza or burgers or sushi to keep us nice and energized. Flowers will use sunlight. Next, we have the stem of the flower, and you can see this flower has a nice long stem. The stem will connect to the roots of the flower to get nutrients and water from the ground, from the soil. You can almost think of the stem of the flower as like a really long straw. There are actually little tiny veins inside there that will suck up the water, and it will actually bring that from its roots up to the leaves, the petals, and the other parts of the flower. Now let's see if we can take a look at how that happens using some chemistry supplies. All right, so let's try it out. So I have some of my favorite chemistry tools here. I have a pipette, which is actually my favorite science word. This is like a mini straw too, just like inside our flower stem. Next, I have H2O, very fancy chemical. Oh wait, H2O is just water. So remember, flowers will drink water by sucking up through the stem. So let's see if we can try it. I'm putting my pipette in my water, and if I get a little squeeze, the water will travel up the pipette like a straw. Let's see. Yep, looks like I got some water out. Now let's do an experiment. Let's see if there's something in my water. So maybe this is some form of pollution in my water. Putting a few drops in there, and you can see it already traveled and mixed in with the water. Now let's see what happens when I suck it up using my pipette or my flower stem. It goes all the way up and turns this yellow too. That's how it works. It travels up the stem, and let's learn a science vocab word, capillary action. Capillary action is the process in which water will travel up a flower stem. Now, this will happen because water molecules are polar, which means they would like to stick together. So the water molecules will actually climb up the stem through its veins, just like the water climbed up in my pipette. The molecules will stick together and climb all the way up to get to the other parts of the flower, like the petals or the leaves. So this flower I have here with me today is actually one of my favorites, and this is a hydrangea. And hydrangeas, like other flowers, will draw nutrients, chemicals, water, minerals, all up from their soil. Now this one you can't really tell. This one's just a little white, but I do have ones that are other colors. I have a pink one and a blue one. Now, these hydrangeas are actually all the same kind, and I could get this blue one to turn pink or this pink one to turn blue. Can you believe it? So this blue flower has something really cool inside it. It has a special ingredient called anthocyanin. Now, that's just a fancy word for a certain coloring, and this coloring is in blueberries, grapes, other berries and red cabbage too. This anthocyanin will actually change color based on the pH of a liquid. So what that means is an acid or a base. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but basically this will sense or measure how much of a certain stuff is in the soil because it draws it up from the stem and will change color. So if I planted my blue plant in a different soil, it would turn pink. I could plant my pink plant in a different soil and it would turn blue. This is also a way to measure the health of the plants. Now you may be wondering about the white one here. This white one doesn't have the anthocyanin in it, so it won't change color like the other ones. Now these are some pretty colors, but I think I want to try and make a rainbow using my chemistry supplies. So let's try that out. So I mentioned there was something called a pH indicator in our flowers, in our hydrangeas. And I actually have a different sort of pH indicator. So it looks like I have 5 glasses of water in front of me, but all of them are slightly different. Let's see if we can figure it out with my pH indicator. So I'll do a few drops in there, a few drops in there, and you can see the colors are already changing. So these colors are telling me something. They're telling me what's inside each container. And I mentioned there is water. My friend water has 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom to get H2O. But sometimes 1 hydrogen will break apart. And when the hydrogen breaks off and is floating on its own as a hydrogen ion, it turns into an acid, which will be red when it comes in contact with the pH indicator. The indicator will count boop, 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 how many hydrogen ions are in there and turn pink as a result. Then I have green. Green is neutral and means that there's mostly all of the hydrogen and oxygen are together in those H2O water molecules. Then I start to get slightly basic. So down here I have some ingredients that are bases. That means they have just the hydrogen and oxygen sitting by themselves. They lost their hydrogen friend. They're a hydroxide or a base. And these different colors match up with numbers as well. In the middle, at about a 7 around here, is our neutral. Then we start getting into our 8s and 9s in this direction. And then 7 will go down all the way to 4 here. So let's talk about how our flowers match up. Now, if I was just matching these by color, I would say blue and pink, right? But it's actually the opposite. The anthocyanin inside here is a different sort of pH indicator. So if something is really acidic, it will actually turn this bluish color in the flower, even though it turns red with my indicator. If something is more neutral, it'll be this pinkish color. Things in between will be shades of purple. So again, you can see how acidic your soil is based on what color your hydrangeas turn. Now let's try and figure out what's inside of these different containers. I said they mostly have water in them. This one actually has some vinegar. Vinegar is something that's acidic. It's actually called acetic acid. Other acids include orange juice, or lemon juice, or coffee, or soda. Things that are more basic tend to be more things like cleaning supplies. So I have some borax in this dark blue one, baking soda in this greenish blue one, and kind of a mixture of things in this lighter green one. So let's flesh out our scale a little more because there's more in here. I mentioned that this has a pH of 4, but this has a pH of 7. So there's a lot of numbers in there, right? let's see if we can get those numbers, and I'll try mixing it up. So let's see, just a little bit, tiny bit of acid, and look, just that small amount turned it this bright orange color. So maybe this is about a 5. Let's see, we have a 7. I'm gonna wanna try and get a 6 in the middle here. So let's do a tiny, tiny drop. All right, maybe that turned it a little lighter. I wanna try something different. So I have something called Alka-Seltzer. You may have seen it or used it before, and this is something that will make drinks fizz to make our stomachs feel better. Alka-Seltzer is really interesting because it has an acid and a base inside of it. It has citric acid, an acid, and baking soda, a base. Now let's see what happens when I put my Alka-Seltzer into my neutral water. Oh my goodness, it's changing to an acid. It's getting that reddish orange. You can also see it's fizzing. This is an example of an acid-base reaction when acid and bases come together to create carbon dioxide or a gas. But wait, look, it's kind of turning a paler orange color, right? Over time, the acid will have reacted out and we'll be left with more of a base. All right, so now you can really see the differences here, right? So this one is really in the middle, right? Maybe it's a 6 on the pH scale. Then we have our 5 and our 4. So we found the different ingredients that were slightly acidic, but not as acidic as our vinegar. Now thinking back to our flowers, remember this blue flower has a pH of 4, so it matches with the red, while the pink flower has a pH of about 7, which means it matches with the green over here. So what's in between pink and blue? Well, if you mix red and blue together, you get purple, right? So anytime you see a purple hydrangea is when you get these middle ranges of acidity. So again, about a 5 and a 6 on the pH scale will get really, really bright purple petals. Now, you may be thinking this pink is pretty pale and that red's really dark and this blue is kind of in the middle. How dark or how light the colors are depends on the concentration of anthocyanin in the flowers. So if you get one that's really, really bright and vibrant, that means it has a lot of anthocyanin in it. Versus this pink one only has a tiny bit because it's a really, really pale pink. Kind of cool, huh? So we learned all about the chemistry behind flowers, but there's a lot more to learn. Did you know there's physics, technology, environmental science, and more involved in plants and flowers? Now let's go to a plant expert to see some plants and explore more about the science behind the flower. Hello again! Let's continue to learn about the science at work behind plants and flowers. Here I am on location at a greenhouse with our guest scientist. Matt Bright is a conservation manager at Earth Sangha, and he's going to give us a little information about some of the science at work here at the greenhouse. Hi, Matt!
Hello! Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we'll go inside and take a look at some of the about 300 different kinds of plants that we grow. So we're inside the greenhouse now. Now it's just the beginning of March. So it's right now about 60, 70 degrees inside the greenhouse, whereas outside it's only about 40. And at night it may get below freezing. But inside where it's nice and warm, where we have a lot of sun coming in, we can trick our plants into thinking it's further along in the season. So just as you guys talked about flowers earlier, all those flowers, if they're pollinated, whether that's by wind or by insects, eventually those flowers will form seed. And what we've done is we've collected the seed, we've cleaned it, Oftentimes the seed pods or the fruit have to get removed from the seed for it to be ready to grow. And then we've sown the seed in the soil that we have here. From there, what a seed needs to grow, it needs a few different things. First, it's going to need water. So for that, we have our sprinkler system set up here, sprays lots of water here, keeps the soil nice and moist. And then the seed will produce roots that takes up that water and allows it to grow, the shoots and the leaves that we think of as being the exciting parts of the plant. The other thing the plant is going to need is it's going to need light. And so that's why we're in this big greenhouse. It's all glass. It allows the light to stream in here. And the third thing that it's going to need is warmth, heat. And so the greenhouse here, it does have heaters, but you may have heard about climate change, about the greenhouse effect. And that's because a good greenhouse, just like what's happening to our planet all over, sunlight comes in, and some of that light and some of that heat is trapped in here. And so over the course of the day, it gets really hot inside the greenhouse, and that makes these little plants think that it's not the beginning of March, but that it's the middle of June, and they're eager to start getting up and growing. And that allows us to grow a lot more plants a lot faster, and to get these things out to the parks and the yards that really need to see them. Let's talk a little bit about how a greenhouse works. So the greenhouse has glass on it, or some of them are plastic. We call that a glazing material. So that's the sort of outside sort of skin of the greenhouse, and that allows light to come back in. Now as the light goes in, and you can kind of see here with the water and the plastic in this bottle, you can see how my hand changes a little bit. And that's due to refraction, and if it gets a little bit fuzzy, that's due to what we call a diffusion. And those two things mean that as the light enters in here, it changes a little bit, and it tends to spread out so it doesn't cast too harsh of a shadow, but it also tends to light up the space. And what happens then when the light is coming in here, not just are the plants using that through photosynthesis to grow bigger, but the soil that's in the pots here is actually warming up. So over the course of a day, as the light hits this, as the temperatures get warmer in here, the soil in the container will get a little bit warmer. So right now, it's a warm day in here. This soil may actually be up to 60 or 70 degrees, which is pretty warm. Now what's interesting is that at night, when it cools off, the air in the greenhouse will cool off a lot faster than the soil will. The soil will stay warm. And that's actually really important, because as you can see, our little tiny baby plants, our little seedlings, are really close to the soil. So the fact that the soil stays warm keeps our little plants a little bit warmer. Here we have a state rare species. This is purple milkweed. So you may have heard of the Monarch Butterfly, a migratory butterfly that we have here in Virginia. And all those butterflies that go up here, they will eat, and they need to eat exclusively our little milkweeds here, including our rare purple milkweed. And those monarchs their entire life cycle depends on this plant. So they'll lay their eggs here. The little caterpillars that hatch out will eat the leaves, and then the adults will need to find more of this to lay their eggs on to reproduce. Eventually those monarchs will then migrate all the way down to Mexico, and then eventually they'll come all the way back up. So the reason that it's important for us to grow these sorts of species is so that we can protect wildlife like the monarch. And similarly to the monarch, that really depends on having the right plants in the right place for them. A lot of different wildlife, whether it's butterflies, whether it's other insects, whether it's birds or even mammals, will require specific plants as a host to complete a life cycle and to make their homes for good habitat and to continue their populations. So a big part of what we do at the Earth Sangha is to grow native plants, and we grow them primarily to get them back out into our wild and natural areas. So that's everything from some of our biggest and most exciting parks, whether you're up in the Potomac, down in Huntley Meadows Park right here in Fairfax County, all the way down to little tiny backyard parks that may be just around the corner from your home, and even backyards are all excellent habitat for wildlife. Really, as soon as you open your door and you're outside, wildlife can make use of that space. So the more of these native plants we add in to the right places, the more of that wildlife will be able to make use of it. You can always join us at our wild plant nursery in Franconia Park in the Springfield area of Fairfax County. Not only can you get your hands dirty and directly work with the plants and help us grow them, but you can purchase some to take them home, or you can help us out at restoration sites and parks throughout Northern Virginia as we try and get our native plants back out into wild areas. Thanks again, everyone.